Alright, so example 2 from 5.1, estimate the area under the curve y equals the square root of 10 minus x from x equals 0 to 4 using 8 approximating rectangles. So again, when I'm doing these problems, what's important to me is what the equation is, my beginning and ending interval, and how many approximating rectangles I'm going to use. And also, what technique am I going to use to approximate the area? We're going to do upper and lower sums. The other technique we're going to do in this section is called the midpoint method. We're going to learn that in 5.1 day 2, I believe. Or maybe we'll be doing that in 5.2 day 1. I can't remember. But somewhere the midpoint method is the other way we're going to do it. There's also a trapezoidal method. We're going to avoid that one. It's not that it's that bad. It's just these two methods are both pretty effective. Throwing a third one in there would just be overkill in my opinion. So, we're going to compute the upper sum, compute the lower sum, average the two sums, rounding our final answer to 3 decimal places, which is what's going to be the approximate area under the curve y equals the square root of 10 minus x. Just to give you a visual of the square root of 10 minus x, here's square root 10 minus x. And my window, I'm going to go from 0 to 4. And just off the top of my head, 10 minus 0 is 10, right? Square root of 10 is a little bit more than 3. 10 minus 4 is 6. Square root of 6 is a little bit more than 2. So it starts off big, it starts getting smaller, right? So if I just went up to, let's say, 3.5, that should be sufficient to see the top of it. And we'll go y min 0, y max 3.5. Let's go up at 0.5 at a time, hit graph. There's what the graph looks like. And it looks almost like a straight line, right? So you write in a trapezoid here, just on one trapezoid. This is one base, this is the other base. The height would be 4, 1/2 to 4 times some of those would be pretty close to the approximate area of that. But again, we're going to be breaking this into rectangles, specifically 8 rectangles. So what I told you on Monday about these types of problems was that first thing I want to do is figure out delta x. So if we're making all these rectangles, so we have this graph here that we just saw, looks like that. We break it into rectangles, like so. Oh, good. You can do the right number. Okay. 8 rectangles. This being the lower sum here, you can see that there's gaps there, so it's going to approximate but not exactly be the area. Delta x is the width of each of these rectangles, and delta x is simply the difference in the beginning and end of the x's divided by how many rectangles we're going to do. So delta x is simply going to equal, in this case, 0.5. Once I know what delta x is, and I know what my starting point is, what my ending point is, and what my equation is, this is where I want to go to Excel if I'm going to use the Excel way of doing this. So if we open up Excel on our computers here, you can see here I've got it opened up. What I want to put in as my categories up top are going to be x, y, delta x, and area. Those should be smaller, but oh well. We make them smaller real quick and then we can change them. So it starts off like that, right? What I want to do is I want to make it bigger so I can see it better and I can display it better. But for you guys, I'd say if you get up in the 14 to 16 range here, that should be big enough for me to be able to see your work well. So if you want to do this, but for my sake here, I'm going to make this 36. And I can just make this bigger like that. We all know how to change stuff on Excel like that. So if you select each of the columns like this and your arrow changes from this to this, that's going to be changing the width of the column. If you have them all selected at the same time, they all change the same way. Same deal with the rows. If I grab the rows all at once, so I'm over here selecting the entire row, I'm not just doing that, but I'm doing the entire row like this. And I change from this into that, is changing the height, so it can be bigger. That should be big enough. And then I'm going to select my whole area here choose all borders. So I like to get the borders around it. So it's not just a bunch of numbers on the paper, they're kind of cordoned off in their little areas there. So the first thing, if you're going to use Excel, I want it to be displayed well. The one other thing you might want to do is if you select all these, maybe, it's not going to let me select all those, dang it. If you select this entire area here and just choose the center, just to center everything, it looks nicer.
How do you do that?
Just if you select the whole thing, so you go
Oh,
in
and
one
then
corner and drag across to the other corner,
Uh-huh.
and then up at the top, there's left, center, right. So
Perfect.
choose center. Right. Not too big on the centering thing, but if you want to do it, that'd be nice. All right, so what we're going to do here is we want to make this right here calculate all the stuff for us, right? And the way we do this is real simple. We start off, x started at where?
0.
0. Okay, delta x is 0.5, right? Y equals the square root of 10 minus x is the equation for y, right? The way you type in square root in Excel is SQRT. SQRT is square root, parentheses. Now, here's where it gets, Excel gets a little bit nitpicky about things. If you type in 10 minus x, it doesn't know what you're talking about. So what you have to do is say 10 minus, and then you select the x value. I'm going to drag this up. We might have to type it in A2. All right, so your equation, oh, I know what's right, I put equals. Sorry. That's my bad. Okay, try again. All right, so everybody has the 0 and the 0.5 in, right? All right, so anytime you want to put a formula, you have to hit equals first. Hit equals. And then you type in SQRT, parentheses, 10 minus, and then if you just arrow over, it'll say A2. And then hit end parentheses.
Mine says C2.
You arrowed over the wrong direction.
I'm just kidding, I fixed it.
Okay, all right. So arrow over to the one you want, which is A2. All right, hit enter, and it'll evaluate that. So that's, that right there is the square root of 10 minus 0. All right. The next thing you want to do is, I'm going to go ahead and get the area. Now, if you think about these rectangles that are being made, the y coordinate's the length, right? And the delta x is the width. So the area is just going to be this times this. So right here, I want to put equals. And then I can either arrow over or I can click. So if I click here, B2 times, and then click there, C2. So again, all I did was hit equals, and then I clicked this, hit times, then I clicked that. So it's just B2 times C2. Hit enter, and it evaluates the area of that one rectangle. All right. Now, you can imagine if we had to do this for every single rectangle, it's going to take a long time. So what we want to do is create formulas here that get everything else filled in. So how is x changing?
Adding by half.
Adding by a half, right? So if I just put on the x in this column here underneath the 0, so I'm right here where this little plus sign is right here. All right. If I hit equals, and what I want to do is I want to take the previous value and add 0.5 to it. So I'm going to push arrow up. There's the previous value, A2, and add, so plus 0.5 equals. It does that. And by doing that, if I now click in this box, there's a formula in that box. It says, in order to evaluate this, we take the box above it and add 0.5. So if I drag this down, which I can't do on the board, okay. Notice the difference in the pointers. So we got this big fat plus sign, and it changes to that really thin plus sign there. That's what you want. You click and drag down. It's going to continue that formula down. So what it does is that formula says, take what's above and add a half. So now here, take what's above, add a half. Take what's above, add a half. Take what's above, add a half. So it just keeps doing that. All right? right here in y, we already have a formula. It says the square root of 10 minus whatever this number is, right? So now if I drag this formula down, it's just going to be square root of 10 minus that number, square root of 10 minus that number, so it's just going to go ahead and fill in that formula straight down. So again, I changed from this fat plus sign to this thin plus sign, drag all the way down, and everything's evaluated straight down. If you want to do a quick check just to verify, this one here, it's supposed to be the square root of 10 minus 1, that's the square root of 9, which equals 3. We already know the square root of 9 is 3, right? So that verifies that's the correct answer. That makes me believe the rest are correct also. This column here is just 0.5, and there's no formula there for it. If you just drag it down, just put 0.5 in every box. dx always stays the same, so once you typed it in, just drag it down the same way you would a formula. So again, I put my arrow right there, so it had the little thin plus sign. Click and drag, and it just fills it all the way down. And here we have a formula which says to multiply these two to get this, I want to multiply these two to get that, and so on. So again, the formula's already there, so I changed to my thin plus sign, and then drag down. Goes ahead and evaluates all those. All right. If you get accustomed to Excel, all that stuff there would take about a minute. Okay, explaining it, of course, took about 5 or 6 minutes here. But honestly, once you get accustomed to how Excel works and how to type formulas in, it's not very difficult to type all that stuff in. Your first line is going to be where all the important stuff is, and then you just got to get some formulas for how to fill in the X, and then everything else just fills down from there. All right. Once you get all that figured out, the upper sum, if you recall from what I told you before, is the sum of the 10 biggest ones. So if I add those 10 up, the 10 biggest areas, that's the upper sum. All right? And the way we add on Excel, come over here somewhere, doesn't matter. I'm going to type upper sum equals. Then I go one box over. I'm going to double. Anytime you double click up here, it automatically sizes it properly. So let me go back how it was. It looked like this, right? So if you just go, column G is the column that's not wide enough, right? Because upper sum goes up from the next box. You just get that right up there and just double click right there. It automatically resizes it for you correctly, so it's a good amount. And what I want to do is I want to evaluate the sum of these numbers. And the way you evaluate a sum is like this. You hit equals sum, parentheses. So the formula is equals sum, parentheses. And then I just want to select this entire row of numbers. So I just click at the top one and hold down and then drag down. I've got this in the way. I've got to get my highlighting out of the way. Let's see, cut. All right. So if I just click this and drag straight down, get all the numbers I want to evaluate, which is those 8, end parentheses, equals. That's the upper sum. And the way I get lower sum, same way. So I type here lower sum equals. And then I just, it says equals sum, parentheses, and then I drag the 10 lowest ones. Enter. Have my upper sum, have my lower sum, right? And then what I said is the area, the average area, is going to equal the average of these two things, right? Averaging is 1 plus the other divided by 2, or you can do this, equals average, parentheses, and then select the 2 that you're averaging in parentheses. We wanted it rounded to how many decimal places? 3. It said 3, right? So basically, this is all my work right here, right? So I've got my chart filled in, I got all my areas listed, I figured my upper lower sum and area. I would say A bar is equal to 11.283. Circle the answer. So you print that off and you just type that in, or you can write that in on your paper when you go to turn it in, what the approximate area is, just rounding it to the right number of decimal places.
How did you do area again?
How did I do this one?
Yeah.
I did the average. You do average parentheses, and then you just select the numbers that are being averaged, which would be the upper and lower sums. The other option would be to take parentheses, this plus this, and parentheses divided by 2. Just manually average it,
Okay.
will be an option also.